Hi, welcome back guys, this is your friend WTFW back with another fiction. What if Deku living as vigilante Batman and a devoted father? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. There's a bat. Always there's a bat. Watching, waiting to take flight after and only after. It's hanging upside down from a street post, wings furrowed and enclosing all the heat from the light bulb for itself. Down below, its shadow shrouds the silver glint of the gun that goes off in the illumination. When two cold bodies hit the pavement, the boy that remains alive also turns cold from having his world turned upside down from that point onward, and the bat turns upright and flies away from its warm perch. Izuku Midoriya slowly stirs from his unconscious state to consciousness, hanging upside down, his mind in a fog, whether from the blood flow rushing to his head or after effects of the nerve gas that infiltrated his system. He can't think straight and evaluate his predicament just yet. All he can focus on is the usual nightmare and the chafing around his ankles. He never remembers that haunting night the same way, but he never forgets it either. Chains grind against his skin and rip his flesh by the feet, keeping him mounted to the ceiling. There's heavy chains around his wrists too, that keep his arms hanging with his body. If he tries to lift his hands, he realizes just how much effort it takes when it comes to the weight. He opens his mouth, but can't even manage to make a grunt or a groan. His throat is dry, parched. He realizes why when a certain scent fills his nostrils. Damp towels are pressed against his chest and back, relieving him of his armor. They are soaked in vinegar. He twists and turns his body, making them peel and fall off of his torso so that he can breathe better. It's hot. He realizes that he must be in another boiler room, perhaps the one under UA. He tries turning his head to check his surroundings and confirm his suspicions, but finds it extremely difficult to try with his movements hindered. His body aches too. Open wounds and old sores cover his body. He realizes none of the lacerations are new. The scars he's gained over the years were reopened. The towels that had been on him are tinged red, and all other blood that's been drained out went into a bucket beneath him. He grits his teeth and tries raising his arms up over his head again. His pits ache in protest, but he pushes through the pain. He's gone through worse. He bends his waist up, reaching for his ankles next. There's no lock to pick, nor anything to use even if there were. But he's mastered escape techniques that use other methods of absconding. Dislocating toes and thumbs, he slips loose from his capture and falls to the floor. The bucket below gets knocked over, blood spilling everywhere and making a huge puddle. He doesn't care, laying in his own bodily fluids as he pants and breathes heavily from the exertion it took to get free. Midoriya rolls over from his back onto his stomach when he hears the unlatching of a metallic door lock. He plans on performing a push-up to get on his feet, but he's much too weak, malnourishment getting the better of him. Instead of moving any more than he already has, he lays there and watches as a small shadowy figure enters the room with him through the opening of what appears to be a chamber door. Midoriya recognizes the creature when it comes closer. Almost humanoid, the animorph walks on two legs. Nezu, the former principal of UA, the Riddler, a criminal now, a villain. Slowly, but surely, it starts to come back to him. Midoriya grits his teeth even harder, grinding them together. Nezu relishes in his captive's rage, impish and grinning. He rolls up a sleeve to check a watch on his wrist before saying, 13 minutes to come to an escape that time. I do believe I'm starting to wear you down, Mr. Midoriya. At that, Midoriya falters. Something must show on his face, because even Nezu appears surprised, though the human and animal hybrid recovers quickly. Perhaps we are proceeding according to agenda then. He covers his watch before clasping his paws together with a clap. I had assumed your mental limits would far exceed that of an average human's, but it is to be expected that you'd give in just like anyone else. Midoriya wants to ask what the malicious menace means by that, but he's lost his voice. He wants to reach out and snatch the sadistic rodent by the throat, but he's lost his strength. All he can do is lay on the floor in confusion, hoping for an answer or an opportunity. Hope. It's something he'd never allowed himself to have. Nobody had come to save his parents, so he shouldn't expect somebody to come save him. And yet, he finds himself childishly hopeful that he'll be saved all over again. He knocks his head against the rough ground, trying to break that mindset and remind himself not to be foolish. That must do the trick, like smacking or banging a device to get the batteries to work again, because memories begin pulling in all at once. This isn't his first time waking up in this place. He's been trapped here for weeks, months. He counted in his head and kept track of time for about 3 to 4 weeks before succumbing to a deep slumber. During that time, he'd been physically tortured and constantly tested to escape despite his injuries. It's nothing he shouldn't have had difficulty with. But over the course of time, he had also begun enduring mental attacks. He's not sure if Nezu utilized toxins and poisons to drug him. Most he had been inoculated for anyways. But his mind had started to fracture and it's now beginning to break. It's like Nezu is trying to make his memory regress back to that night. It had begun with a line of questioning about the vivid details, which Midoriya had refused at first to indulge, but then each scar that told a tale of his journey, training and then crusading, began to reopen. He relived his creation into Batman and all of his secrets were spilled. Did you know the kanji for riddle, Nazo, is closely related to my name Nezu? Midoriya raises his head to see the inhumane vermin waiting with an expectant expression. He does know that. He remembers having a conversation where Nezu broke down the reason he chose to write him riddles due to the irony and the strange humor because of the kanji in his name. He should have put 2 and 2 together with that clue and figured everything out sooner. Midoriya nods, understanding Japanese grammar and spelling regardless of Nezu's quirkiness. So that's where we're at. Nezu pauses as though he's jotting down notes with his thoughts. He then squats down and sits cross-legged across from Midoriya, getting comfortable. I'm not so sure I like that look of disdain in your eyes though. Perhaps you need a reminder as to why I'm doing this in order to regain some semblance of empathy. Midoriya glares into the chimera's beady black eyes, but does find himself acknowledging the scar that runs through one of them. He vaguely recalls Nezu telling him the origins of that injury, though he can't remember the exact story. Like any animal, I was subjected to mistreatment and abuse by humans. The hero-turned-villain says it nonchalantly, but there's an undertone of venom secreting from his tone. I was experimented on due to my having a quirk with no regard for my consciousness of what I had to endure on a regular basis. Midoriya tries pushing himself forward to interrupt, but Nezu stops him with a swift backhand. You can't blame me for holding a grudge, Mr. Midoriya. He whispers like he's telling a personal secret. Midoriya turns his bruised cheek back towards the villain, glaring with defiance. I hated humans for their lack of regard for me, until Shota Aizawa, Eraserhead, rescued me. He had discovered the lab's secret experiments on me, the ones they conducted out of the public eye, and exposed them. I had never met a human with genuine compassion for anyone but themselves until I met Aizawa. Nezu carries on with his story anyways, pausing only to add, you reminded me quite a lot of him actually. So, to repay him, I became a hero too. And I learned through him that heroes were more people who cared for others than themselves. That he wasn't the only good-hearted being. Nezu briefly stares off into the distance with a somewhat reminiscent fondness before quickly returning to his former state. That wasn't always the case, of course. Like the lab that had conducted experiments on me and other quirked animals in secret, heroes had their secrets too. Many of them were frauds and fakes. Nezu fiddles with the nails poking out from his paws, staring down at them as though only he alone knows what they're capable of. And that was how I learned that all humans were frauds, just like I had formerly believed. They're just deceptive by nature at hiding their true selves. When the chips are down, they're only in it for themselves. Money to get ahead, children for a legacy, fame for a lasting standing, rescue for idolization. Never a sincere, humble, righteous reason for heroics. A small smile crosses the chimera's lips. I tried changing this issue by running a school and attempting to teach prospective heroes the true meaning of being heroes with Aizawa as a role model teacher. But that didn't work either. Nezu springs to his feet with a tiny hop, a sudden burst of energy overtaking him. All I received in return was criticisms from the public. Humans wanted to blame anyone but themselves for their own making of society, and it was easier to blame the ones trying to change it rather than better themselves with adaptation to a change. He giggles like the story he's telling is one big long joke. Rather than shut down UA in an attempt to change the way things function, they just fired me and brought in a new principle. Pin the blame on someone and carry on until they can blame things on their next scapegoat. That's all that they ever do. Nezu begins to walk around Midoriya, circling him as some sort of prey. They would have you believe real heroes don't wear masks. All Might didn't wear a mask. Don't be afraid to show your true face. But you know that's a lie. Once again, it's all about fame and credit. Fake smiles, fake faces. Real heroes aren't people. They have no identity, they just are. A legend. Nezu stops when he completes the cycle to face Midoriya head on. That's when your influence came into play. After the war, after Aizawa's retirement, you gave me more hope than Tagada ever could that there was still hope for real heroes. Nezu crouches down, leveling his gaze with Midoriya so that they're even. You kept your identity a secret. A vigilante in every sense of the word. Not for fame or fortune, but to make a real change. And I found myself intrigued as to why after all this time, after waiting all these years, why it was now that you had come too late. Imagine my awe when I learned your family history, stemming from the same evil that breeds every other human, corruption and pride and greed. You turned out different thanks to the death of your parents and their true colors unbeknownst to you. The lack of a quirk's power to perceive yourself as higher than others. You worked hard to put yourself at an equal footing to fight that injustice. Truly admirable. Nezu then returns to standing, his gaze looking down upon Midoriya. So I had to test you. I had to see whether or not you were what you appeared to be. Were you a fraud like the rest? Or are you one of a kind? Are you the answer? The solution that I've been seeking to solve the problem of humanity? I brought the truth of your parents to light to see if that would be enough to break you. I tested your morals and your sense of virtues to see if you would be crippled or compromised. His tone becomes darker as he reaches for Midoriya. You remained intact, and so I now must see why that is. And Izuku Midoriya is greeted by a black abyss once again. Suddenly, he's cradled up on a couch. There's a scent of hot cocoa and the warmth of a fireplace. The fire burns brighter than any street lamp, warding off the shadows that seep in through the night. A window tinged blue and white with frost, a blizzard outside, a contrast of pale moonlight. Midoriya feels safe here. No longer a prayer for home, he is home. And he's not alone. Someone is there with him on the couch, running their fingers through his hair. He turns and raises his head to see a woman with long green hair like his own. Mother, Midoriya groggily awakens in a hospital bed. The green-haired woman he had seen in his dreams is still there though, through his blurry vision. When his eyes focus and adjust, he sees that the woman is Tomoko Shiretoko. Shiretoko sits by his bedside, a mixture of various emotions on her face. She stands up and shouts, he's awake. For all the years Kurogiri had been Izuku Midoriya's guardian and caretaker, not once had he truly seen the sorrow and despair leave the orphan's eyes. Vibrant radiance as bright as green grass, full of life and just as soft, were darkened in the shadows and transformed into hardened malachite. Any smile below his eyeline never quite reached his gaze. The scars, mentally and physically ingrained into the boy as he grew older into a man, were mirrored in the reflection of his sclera where blood vessels stemmed in red lines. Not even when Midoriya had met Shield, Shiretoko, or any other potential woman love interest did that dead stare change. Not even when a new family had been built to replace the one he had lost. A pet dog, Ace the stray hound, Eri, an adopted daughter. It was never enough to revive the life that had been lost that night in the alley along with his parents. But now, the eyes Kurogiri stare into, they are not the same he had gotten accustomed to seeing. Izuku Midoriya lives again. He's covered in gauze, wrapped head to toe in bandages as always. Monitors, a feeding tube and drip. He's connected to all sorts of medical equipment, but there's a different air to the room. His mouth isn't set in a grim line. He's smiling. He isn't unplugging the wires and forcing himself to wobble on his weak legs in order to endure more physical punishment. He's resting. And again, his eyes. Kurogiri would swear by anyone that those aren't the same eyes. They're hopeful. The fondness is glossy and glowing in his gaze. There's a love there that had been lost, now found and returned somehow. There's genuine happiness. He's happy. Eri matches his expression. A huge smile on her face as she eats a candy apple and swings her legs in a visitor's chair. The girl is still wearing her school uniform, having just come from classes. The two are enjoying one another's company, Midoriya actually spending the time to be a father figure to her. And we even got to pick our hero names today. She excitedly shares with him how she spent her day, and he actually gives his full undivided attention to listen. Really, what do you decide on? There's an almost childlike innocence to him that matches Eri's energy. The usual stoic demeanor is gone. He's finally done closing himself off and started opening up. He's even taken up the hobby of writing quirk and hero analysis in notebooks again instead of tactically studying and profiling people. Right this very second, for instance, the pencil in his hand is flying across the page as he jots down potential hero name suggestions for Eri. Eri blushes, looking away from his radiance like she's stared directly into the sun for far too long. Suddenly shy, she tucks a stray strand of hair behind her ear before bringing herself to share, I was thinking. Robin. When she looks back at her adoptive father to see his reaction, she sees him urging her to continue with an eager nod. Because robins are symbols of age, hope, and renewal. Everyone is looking for hope right now, and I thought the idea of renewal was fitting with my quirk. She timidly fiddles with her nails while staring down at her lap before glancing up again. Midoriya's eyes are so tender that they water at the corners, almost on the brink of tears. That's perfect, Eri. He praises her name choice and reasoning with such sincerity that nobody would believe the optimist he is now would have pessimistically considered Lemillion as a symbol of hope pointless. Have you designed a costume yet? He flips to a blank page in his notebook to start doodling outfits next. Kurogiri stares in shock. His yellow slithers are wide bars, taking in the scene in front of him. He's not so sure the man that they found is the same Izuku Midoriya that had gone missing. He'd consider Himiko Toga taking his place as some sort of imposter if she weren't captured. The way he was discovered unconscious outside the hospital was suspicious enough considering he'd come to the manor or cave before going to a public place. But all the tests that had been done, some from heroes at Kurogiri's discretion, proved the man in front of him is the one and only authentic Izuku Midoriya. It's when Eri says, I was thinking something a bit more colorful than yours. And Midoriya responds, what do you mean? Kurogiri suddenly understands why the man he raised is acting so differently. You don't remember. He utters his realization under his breath. Midoriya has completely forgotten that he's Batman, perhaps even the purpose of his crusade altogether. Well, I'd want a cape like you have though. Eri obliviously continues to talk as though he does still have some awareness of his alter ego. She doesn't realize nor know it herself yet what's happened to him. I don't really get what you mean, but sure, capes are cool. You know, All Might's Silver Age costume had a cape. Midoriya scratches his head like he's tending to a nervous itch before returning to doodling in his notebook. I was thinking more along the lines of practicality. How should it accommodate to your quirk? Suddenly, Eri's energy depletes, along with her smile. Oh, her shoulders droop with the curve of her lips as she mumbles, I didn't really think about that. Eri's quirk is still a sensitive issue to be worked on, considering Midoriya's memory is faulty though. Kurogiri intervenes to salvage the situation. Miss Eri has been receiving counseling from her homeroom teacher, and that luckily rekindles Eri's enthusiasm. Yeah, it really helps. Mr. Todoroki says he had trouble deciding whether or not to use his quirk too, so he told me to try flipping a yen coin anytime I have trouble. Midoriya's eyes widen at that. The number 2 hero. He would have already known about the hero's employ had his memory not been toyed with. Wow, that's amazing, Eri. Becoming disturbed by the way Midoriya is acting and the reason why, Kurogiri hopes to cut things short and speak with a doctor. I believe that's enough for today. He places a hand on Eri's shoulder but speaks directly to Midoriya. You shouldn't exert yourself too much. Ah, come on, do we have to go? Eri complains about having to leave but gets up from her chair anyways. Kurogiri speaks tersely. Yes, Eri. The authority in his tone surprising her. He realizes his own intensity and backpedals with a softer suggestion. Why don't you grab something from the vending machines to snack on during the drive back? Okay. She nods while walking away but still seems shaken. Midoriya saying, she's a good kid. Doesn't allow Kurogiri to dwell on his mistake for too long though. The guardian looks at the man he helped raise and replies, of course she is. She's her kid. Earning a sheepish smile from Midoriya. Thanks. He rests his head on his pillow while gazing upwards. I'm just glad she's doing well without me. Kurogiri feels a sharp pang in his chest for some reason. You'll recover and return home soon, and has the strong urge to set things straight. The thing is, something is stopping him. He's hesitant to snuff out the light in those eyes for the sake of Midoriya's identity if it means. Until then, I want to ask you before I go, sir. Izuku. Kurogiri's yellow slants for eyes wobble as they try to stay steady. Midoriya sits back up, hearing and seeing his caretaker's reluctance to speak his mind. He cautiously asks, what is it, Kurogiri? Kurogiri clenches his fists before working up the courage. Are you happy? And looking into those lively eyes again. More than I've ever been. They're as bright as Midoriya's toothy smile. And Kurogiri can't bring himself to destroy that. He deserves to be happy. The world can do without Batman. Izuku Midoriya can do without Batman. Underneath the purple smog that shrouds his face, Kurogiri is smiling back. That's all I want for you, my boy. But the thing about smiles is that they can be dangerously contagious. Katsuki Bakugo watches the news with a rictus grin. His movements kept to a minimum thanks to a straitjacket. He settles for rocking back and forth. The television tells him a story about his childhood friend getting into a bad sports car accident. No doubt, the whole thing is a fabrication thought up to disclose the fact that Izuku Midoriya is Batman. A cover story. Pure fiction. The public eats it up and actually buys into the bullshit lies. It's so funny that Bakugo lets out a little giggle. Whatever the real reason is that he was admitted to the hospital, he'll no doubt be back in action in no time. After all, the world needs its caped crusader. The bat signal in the sky outside Bakugo's cell window is the proof in the pudding. Bakugo loves how long it stays up. A reminder that Batman is out there despite not being on the official hero listing. But suddenly, the light goes out. The light reflecting in Bakugo's red eyes goes out. His smile drops. Without Batman, crime has no punchline. And that's not funny. Looks like you need me just as much as I need you. Bakugo begins his escape by slipping free from his straitjacket. Arms spread wide, wishing to give his friend a big bone-crushing hug. He plans to reignite the sparks using his own 2 hands. Ready or not, here I come. He allows himself to smile again. Batman. Darling. During his last day in the hospital, Midoriya wasn't expecting any visitors, least of all his childhood friend coming to check up on him years later. Kaken, his pointed ashen blonde hair and rugged good looks have barely changed, minus the scar at the center of his forehead, though Midoriya figures Kaken must have just gotten that wound from doing hero work. Rather, the weirdest changes are his old chum's shift in personality and fashion sense. For starters, Kaken isn't one for wearing a suit and tie, a purple one no less, and the usually gruff attitude he'd inherited from his mother has switched to the opposite side of the spectrum, a much more friendly side to his friend that he didn't know existed until now. Not that he should be complaining. It's nice to be close to Kaken again after all this time. The happy-go-lucky blonde has his arm wrapped around Midoriya's shoulders, pulling him into a side hug while he sits on the edge of the hospital bed. Funny thing happened on my way over here. I ran into that American girl and she asked about you. Maybe you and her should go out on a date. He fabricates a story and weaves lies much to Midoriya's current state of naivety. The bedridden billionaire blushes at the implication of a girl liking him. Really? I don't know, Kaken. Though it must be true if Kaken says it is. He trusts his childhood friend more than anyone after all. Kaken shakes the relative wallflower a little to get the nerves out, laughing a bit. You should make your move. Just go and do something small for a first time out. He pauses like he's thinking of an idea before snapping his fingers with his free hand. Hey, I know. Why don't you take her to see a movie? A sly smile starts to spread across his face. Midoriya looks away, as though he's searching for an excuse. He finds one when he remembers, I can't. I got a responsibility to raise that girl I took in. But Kaken's smile doesn't waver. He just shrugs the reasoning off like he deflected the excuse using a shield. Just bring Eri with you. Ladies love seeing men are good with kids. His red eyes glint with amusement. Well, Midoriya falters, but ultimately realizes there's no winning an argument with Kaken, if you say so. That's the spirit. Kaken bounces on the bed with joy while giving his childhood friend a firm squeeze. Call her up right now and set up the date for tonight. Why don't you? He urges Midoriya on by grabbing the hospital's bedside phone to dial. Tonight. Right now. Midoriya squeaks out in surprise. He's reduced to a stammering mess while Kaken dials for him. And he has no choice but to take the phone from Kaken when it's practically shoved in his face. Hello? Melissa Shields' voice comes through the line inquisitively. Midoriya winces when he realizes he's forced to go through with asking her out now. He presses the phone to his ear and clears his throat. Hey, I'm Melissa. Izuku. He blushes at the usage of his first name. I heard what happened. Are you okay? His face goes from warm to hot when he hears the concern in her tone too. Midoriya quickly glances over towards Kaken for advice, but only gets an unhelpful thumbs up in response as his only encouragement. Ooh, I'm fine. Doctor said I should be discharged later today. He runs a hand through his curly green hair as he mentally prepares himself for what he's about to say next. That's actually partially why I'm calling. I was wondering if why you would like to, tea tonight. Maybe. We should pee probably or could pee potentially. Or what if we W or two? What? Shield interrupts the ramblings in confusion, making Midoriya wince a second time since he's called her. He decides to just rip it off like a band-aid. Hastily, he blurts out, Eri and I were planning to see movie at night and I was wondering if I would like to come with us. Oh, why didn't you just say so? And she somehow understands the hurried word jumble enough to reply, I'd love to. Midoriya sits up straight, startled by the loudness of her enthusiasm. Really? He's now grinning ear to ear just as much as Kaken. I mean, great. I'll have Kurogiri pick you up at 8. The blonde's thumbs up switches to a much lewder hand gesture that flusters Midoriya so much he winds up hanging up on her after setting the time. Kaken. Stop that. The blonde bursts into gleeful laughter, doubling over. Midoriya had never seen his friend laugh so hard before. Seeing Kaken so happy makes him laugh along, smiling too. After they're finished, Kaken feigns wiping a tear in between aftermath giggles. Good to know you can still take a joke. Midoriya chuckles, laying back down. Yeah, he's suddenly tired from exerting himself so much. Despite being cleared for release, he's still not recovered 100%. Thanks, Kaken. I needed this. But he thinks the whole thing was worth the energy. Kaken seems to think so too, flashing a toothy grin. Of course, his voice is a low growl, but he sounds sincere when he adds, what are friends for? Despite the question being rhetorical, he carries on before Midoriya can have any chance to answer. Welp, I should get going. He claps his hands together while backing out of the room. Have a fantastic time tonight. It should be enlightening. Okay. Bye, Kaken. Midoriya raises a brow at the odd farewell but shrugs it off nevertheless. He reaches for the TV remote afterwards, but finds that it's missing from where it was placed. Come to think of it, Kaken turned the television off when he first came into the room, cutting the news station's story about some sort of prison breakout. Now the clicker is missing. Midoriya shakes the suspicion from his mind. He has no idea where those thoughts came from. After all, why would he suspect his best friend? The remote probably just got misplaced or taken by one of the orderlies. Midoriya closes his eyes, figuring that he should get some sleep instead anyways. He needs to be well rested for his date tonight. So he drifts into unconsciousness, allowing slumber to overtake him. Though he gets less than a peaceful nap, his dreams quickly become nightmares, haunting him with an irrational fear of clowns. Green hair, red smiles, obnoxious laughs. The madness echoes within his mind. Then a bullet flies through the clown's head and into his. Midoriya snaps awake, breathing heavily and reaching for his forehead. There's an ache, not quite a migraine, but no bullet hole. There's still something missing from his memory. No matter how hard he strains to remember what it is that he's forgetting. His thumb traces down to his brow as he gives up on trying to clear the fog in his mind. He instead calls for a nurse to take something for his headache and makes another attempt to get some more sleep. The next time Midoriya wakes, it's because Kurogiri has come to sign him out. He's taken out in a wheelchair, much to Irie's delight to push him around. Irie is even more thrilled when he tells her about the date he set for the movie theater. And even though Kurogiri warns him that he just got released for him to be overexerting his energy, the caretaker is just as happily supportive. I never imagined that you would one day spend a night like this. Kurogiri watches Midoriya climb out of the vehicle with a fondness in his tone that matches his slanted yellow eyes. What do you mean, Kurogiri? Midoriya's smirk matches his raised eyebrow. He's expecting some kind of quip. What he gets instead is a pause of silence. Kurogiri takes in the sight of the boy he raised, now a man, standing beside the daughter that he adopted and his date Melissa Shield. Nothing, Izuku. Nothing at all. He begins rolling up the door's window and looks ahead in order to drive away. Midoriya is taken back by his caretaker's actions, but shrugs it off just as quickly. Irie and Shield make the strange moment easily forgettable. Hand in hand, snacks in mouth, they spend the night watching the latest cinematic release. However, it's what happens after that will be committable to memory. When the three come out of the theater, the night has overtaken the city. Dead bulbs darken the sidewalk. No path of light to guide them home. Irie's grip tightens, her hand in Midoriya's. On the other side, Shield holds on just as strong. The touch is a familiar one. The sight is similar, the glint in the dark, the glimmer of something other than hope. A gun. Get back. Midoriya instinctively moves Irie and Shield behind him. He protectively places himself in the front, facing the figure that's moving towards them. The tall figure is wearing a wide-brimmed hat that conceals their face and a long overcoat that drags along the ground. But the color, this is a familiar sight for you, eh, Izuku? And the voice. Midoriya's green eyes reflect the purple outfit before tracing it to the wearer's grinning expression. Midoriya swallows, not wanting to identify the man in front of him. Somehow, he can and can't recognize his childhood friend's appearance at the same time, as though the hero had undergone some sort of transformation to become a villain. He asks anyways, Kaken? But he was right in doubting. I got a new nickname now. It's not Kaken who answers, Joker. The gunshot that rings out is just as deafening as Irie's scream. The sound of the pearls from Shield's necklace hitting the pavement echo in that wide space. Darkness surrounds Izuku Midoriya before closing in on him. Suddenly, the street is small, just like the child watching their mother shot through the stomach. Shield falls as a bullet penetrates her waist, and Midoriya bleeds out from a bullet in her abdomen. The shooter, a cruel monster in the dark. The screeching, like the sound of a bat. Despite the absence of a breeze, the night is chilly. Commissioner Tsukachi shoves his hands into his coat pockets, a cigarette hanging out the side of his mouth burning to keep him warm. The heat from the modified floodlight beside him helps a little too. But who he's waiting for couldn't ever be more cold or distant. Tsukachi looks over his shoulder, expecting to find the vigilante hiding in the shadows, but sees Tagata instead. The hero crosses his arms over the number emblazoned on his chest, shrugging the shoulders his red cape hangs off of. They've been standing on the precinct's rooftop for over an hour now, and Batman is still a no-show. The vigilante's lack of function lately unnerves the two of them, especially considering the last time the Caped Crusader was seen in action had been during the large raid against Penguin. Tsukachi huffs through his nose before pulling the lever on the floodlight, switching the signal off. The commissioner plucks the cigarette from his mouth, tosses it down, and stomps it out as he steps toward the roof access stairs to go back inside. He isn't coming, Tagata asks with a frown as Tsukachi walks past him. The hero stares at the city through his visor, the dark empty sky casting a shadow without the bat signal's beam. The commissioner pauses, stopping to look over his shoulder. He catches a glimpse of the same sight. Disappointed with the view, he replies, No, I don't think he is anymore. Izuku Midoriya stares up at that same void of sky covering the city from inside a hospital room. He hadn't expected to be returning to the medical facility so soon, nor for the reason that he is. Midoriya turns his gaze from the room's window to the bed in front of him. Melissa Shield is asleep, covered by a blanket and wired into machines to monitor her health. She had barely made it when rushed to the hospital. Restless even in her sleep, Irie burrows into her guardian's chest. Midoriya looks down, reminded that he's holding her in his arms. His heart aches for her. She had to witness Shield being shot and hadn't stopped clinging to him ever since. He runs his hand through her long silvery hair in an attempt to comfort her. On the television, a news broadcast reports a major development in the hero world. Even with the audio off, Midoriya keeps track of the story. A retired hero has returned to duty after uncovering a ring of corruption in the system. The current principal of UA no less has been exposed by the original principal of UA, the original reclaiming his position. Intelli is shown being carted away in handcuffs as Nezu smiles and waves to the camera. Midoriya's head begins to throb. He forces himself to look away to make it stop. When he does, he spots a fellow greenette in the doorway. Tomoko Shirotoko knocks lightly on the frame before entering, careful not to wake Irie as she asks, Is she okay? Shirotoko notices the haggard form of Midoriya and adds, Are you okay? Why yeah, Midoriya nods as he glances back down to make sure the girl that he's holding truly is okay. She'll be fine, I think. His words are mumbled, mainly because he's not so sure that he believes them. Shirotoko is quiet for a moment, perhaps contemplating her response. Eventually, she comes further into the room so she's close enough to personally ask again, "And you?" Midoriya blinks as he processes the question. He shakes his head since his hands are too occupied to wave it off. "I'll be okay." Then asks in return, "Did Kurogiri send you?" "He told me what happened." Shirotoko looks away to hide her embarrassment but winds up looking at the blonde in the hospital bed. "I'm sorry about your friend." Midoriya closes his eyes, unable to stand seeing S.H.I.E.L.D. in such a poor state anymore. He gives Shirotoko the rundown as he mentally recalls it himself. "The medical report that the doctor gave me says she'll never walk again. Shot through the spine, severing it completely. But she's alive." Shirotoko's response makes Midoriya's eyes shoot open in shock. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean for that to sound insensitive." No, you're right." He realizes that she was simply trying to console him and sighs. "I just can't help but feel this is all my fault." Shirotoko hums, staring down at the floor as though she'll find the right response there. But Greenette instead tries cheering him up. "She's super smart, isn't she? She could probably make something to help her walk again. Or a really cool wheelchair, at least." Not helping. But Midoriya's mood isn't so easily perked up. "Sorry." Shirotoko winces a little. Once she recovers, she redirects the conversation. "I'd like to say I only came to check up on you, but I'm mainly here for Iri's sake." Midoriya raises a brow. "Yeah." Shirotoko nods before explaining. "I booked a flight a while ago. I was planning on asking this anyways, but now, I think more than ever we need to reconsider where we stand with our shared parenting." "What are you saying?" Midoriya does his best to sit up straight without disturbing Iri's nap. He knows that whatever Shirotoko has to say deserves his full undivided attention. And he's right. Her staying here, you said it yourself, that it was only a temporary treatment, that you didn't want it. Maybe I should get her out of this city, this country, and take her to America with me. The shared legal guardian of the girl voices her legitimate concerns. Midoriya tries to reply, but his voice suddenly runs dry. He swallows some saliva to moisten his mouth and tries again. "You mean?" "No, I want to stay." Iri's sudden outburst startles him. She stirs in his lap before reclining to the fabric of his shirt and crying into it. I want to stay." "Iri." Midoriya mumbles in shock over the emotional interruption. He hadn't expected her to react in such a way to the news, especially considering she had been listening in the whole time, pretending to be asleep. He realizes the girl heard everything when she asks him, "You don't want me?" He falters as he tries to respond, but his mind won't allow him to fill in the blanks. He can't imagine a time when he wouldn't have wanted to adopt Iri as his daughter, so he answers honestly, "Of course I want you." Iri's bright red eyes water at the corners before she wails into his chest again. "Daddy." Midoriya holds her close to his heart, shaken by the affectionate title she called him. He cries too. Shirotoko watches the entire exchange, shedding her own single tear. "I guess that's what I get for not being around." She wipes it away with a finger and sniffles a little before forcing a smile. "Looks like she's your kitten now." "I do want to keep her safe though." Midoriya recalls the danger he had put Iri in. Kaken, he the white face. The blood-red smile. That wasn't his childhood friend. Bakugo. Or, Midoriya forces himself to think of the shooter as somebody else entirely. "Joker did this all because of me. She's safe in your hands. You just weren't ready for that." Shirotoko steps closer to place a consoling hand on his shoulder. "But Kurogiri and I talked. It's time that we show you something." Kurogiri's voice draws Midoriya's gaze up. He hadn't realized his own caretaker and guardian had arrived a while ago. Midoriya stares at the butler, the man who raised him. There's something different about those yellow slithers for eyes. They're somber, yet accepting. Midoriya turns his gaze back to Shirotoko and sees the same sad look. Iri shifts from Midoriya's lap to the seat beside him so that he can stand up. He does so slowly. He does so almost warily. "What is it that you want to show me?" He's beginning to get just as worried as they are. Kurogiri's response is that Midoriya see for himself, a warp gate opening in the center of the room for transport. The man suddenly feels like a boy again, afraid to enter. The dark swirling vortex shares the qualities of the shadows, like he's about to walk into a dark alley. What's in there? He looks to his father figure for guidance, but there's nothing Kurogiri can give him. This is something that Midoriya must do for himself. Midoriya takes slow steps forward and enters the black hole. On the other side, he finds himself at the top of a staircase. A dark tunnel leading down lays ahead of him. He feels afraid, not of the dark, but of a metallic glint, like the one from the gun Joker used. Like the gun in the alley, Midoriya begins his descent. Each step has him feeling closer to the answers at the bottom. Instead of glistening light coming out from the darkness, he's met by a winged mammal. A flying creature comes at him, screeching as though calling his name. And he realizes then that it's a bat. It's not the first time that Izuku Midoriya has been in this interrogation room. It is, however, the first time that he's not on the receiving end of the table. Instead, he finds himself sitting across from the former principal of UA. Intelli smiles sidelong at him, a curious glint in her gaze. "Well, Mr. Midoriya, to what do I owe this unexpected visit?" she asks, cutting straight to the chase. Midoriya leans forwards with his elbows propped on the table. He keeps his voice level as a precaution but wants the woman to hear him when he says, "I think you're being framed the same as I was. Same person, same play, just a different stage." That manages to break her bemusement at his presence. She immediately shifts gears, turning serious, and returns the propped posture to lean forward and meet him halfway. "What do you know about that?" Her tone lacks suspicion but it is demanding of answers. But unfortunately, Midoriya has none. He shakes his head apologetically. "Nothing really. Just hearsay without evidence." Intelli sighs, just short of cursing under her breath, and sits back in her chair. "And here I thought you were smarter than you were letting on." She sounds disappointed and Midoriya tries not to be too offended by the remark. But what she says next does help remedy any ill feelings. "Though I did misjudge you before. I'm sorry for suspecting and coming down on you so hard." Midoriya waves a hand dismissively. "Water under the bridge." He then leans back in his own chair and prompts her with that same hand. "What matters is clearing up your own accusations now." Intelli nods uncommitably, like her mind is distant. Midoriya doubts tea has been on the menu for her during her holding. Batman's disappearance was linked to the school. Fake evidence planted by Nezu like the security footage of you at the Iceberg Lounge. She explains that his capture and torture had been pinned on her. He contemplates the grand scope of that agenda, to lure him there and Nezu regain his position as principal via the setup. There has to be a reason he wanted to be back at UA specifically. He doesn't doubt Nezu could have obtained political power or another higher standing of status quo had he wanted. So what was so special about the Heroes' School? Had he missed something in its halls? You didn't see any of it coming. He has to wonder if Nezu had been in contact with Intelli beforehand or if this had been completely under her nose. "No, it completely blindsided me." She frowns as she admits that he caught her by surprise. "So there's no leads there. Intelli was somehow just a pawn in this giant game of Nezu's. Then we've got that in common." He massages his temple as he recalls the way his mind was toyed with and damaged. Intelli peers at him, trying to see what it is that he's hiding from her just as much as she is from him. "How are you involved in all of this?" she wonders. Midoriya's mind lingers on his torture. The trauma makes him grind his teeth together. He knows that it has everything to do with him somehow. "I'm not sure, but I'm going to find out." He starts to stand up in hopes that he'll be able to get better results elsewhere if Intelli isn't going to be any help. Intelli purses her lips and gives him a withering look. "That doesn't sound like a good idea. You aren't a hero, Mr. Midoriya." But he turns his back to her, already treading towards the door. "We don't all need quirks to be heroes." He mutters it just loud enough for the ex-principal to hear. When he gets to his car, he connects the Bluetooth speaker to his phone and calls Kurogiri. His guardian answers on the first ring. "How did it go?" Kurogiri tries not to sound as eager as Midoriya feels to gain some answers. "I was right that she had been framed by Nezu, but didn't learn anything new other than that confirmation." Midoriya grumbles as he shifts the car into gear and begins driving. "It seems this one is as slippery as ever." Kurogiri voices his own displeasure over the denon, but quickly recovers to change the conversation and mood by extension by saying, "You should return home then. Mistress Iri has been asking for you." Midoriya shakes his head, then realizes Kurogiri can't see him. Now's not a good time. Nezu needs to come first. He cuts in between traffic to gain some speed, though he knows not which way he's going in his search. "Sir, I understand that your mission is important to you, now more than ever with your memory returning. But this girl needs a father." Kurogiri continues to plead over the speaker, making Midoriya pause and slow on the speedometer. "It's true, I've been keeping her at arm's length. I'm scared to get too close, in case I lose her too." He admits to his fears of connection. It's why he'd also pushed away Shirotoko, Shield, and even Kurogiri. But it's then that he realizes he already has those connections. He already has those feelings, those fears. His eyes widen when he realizes what Nezu has planned. It suddenly makes sense. Why Nezu organized things so that he'd regain control of UA. Why he killed the Yakuza and planned to use Midoriya for custody. It was all to gain access to Iri. The car's tires screech in protest as Midoriya hits a sharp turn. Nezu moves the Black Knight into position on the game board. In front of him is a vast array of chess pieces, the pawns mid-battle. With a tiny toothy grin and a twinkle in his otherwise black beady eyes, he awaits his opponent's move. Much to his delight, player 2 doesn't disappoint. The set of double doors to the office swing open and Batman enters through the entrance. This time, the vigilante has on a mouthpiece gas mask. Nezu can't help but giggle at the overdramatic precautionary antics of the self-proclaimed hero. "I see you've learned from your past mistakes." He waves his paws up in a mock surrendering flourish. Despite all the bravado, it's just a joke. There's no toxins or gases filtering around through the air this time. It's over. I know what you've been scheming. Batman growls through a voice-modulating filter in the mouthpiece covering his chin. He stands tall, cape closed around him as the back-pointed ends drag along the carpeted floor. Whether it's a bluff or not, the vigilante comes across as confident. Nezu relaxes in his chair, folding his paws over one another. The grin hasn't left his maw. That's because you would already know had all of your memories returned. That remark gives the Batman pause. The vigilante's stride stops as he considers what the newly reappointed principal said. The two meet one another's gaze. Nezu's dark voids stare into the white narrowed lens of Batman's cowl. That speaks volumes without either of them saying a word. Nezu deduced that not all of the vigilante's memories returned, and not even the vigilante himself knew that was the case. What do you want to use Eri for? Batman opts for a different approach just to be cautious. He's laying his own bait as Nezu had to figure out his amnesia remains. The question meant to confirm whether or not his suspicions about the girl's involvement are true while simultaneously figuring out the grander scope of those supposed plans. Sometimes, a damaged mind can be too much to handle. Nezu mimes drawing the word damaged in cursive over his forehead. The tiny claw he uses as a pen courses through his fur. The nail eventually reaches the scar that strikes through one of his eyes, resting there momentarily. Kurajiri, Bakugo, Hugh. Nezu names a few damaged minds before losing his grin and adding one more, me. Batman raises his head higher, noting that last part the most. He squints with a critical gaze while prompting Nezu to elaborate, you. I'm cursed with knowledge, I'm afraid. Nezu feigns to be dramatic by placing the back of his paw against his forehead. Receiving no reaction from the Caped Crusader over his antics, the Chimera settles back into his seat with a sigh. I'm talking about split personalities, Mr. Midoriya. Or, at least, an imbalance of thought. Still no reaction from the vigilante. Nezu resists, grinding his claws into his desk. Do I really have to spell it out for you? Kurajiri, your caretaker is a NOMU created from the corpse of a former UA student. He's as fractured a mind as Bakugo is nowadays. Or you are with your alter ego as Batman. That gives Midoriya pause, shaking him to his core. Having conquered the art of fear, it's been a while since something has sent chills up his spine, but that revelation puts him off balance. Kurajiri is. Midoriya trails off and swallows the words that were on his tongue. The vigilante pushes that matter to the back of his mind and refocuses on the enemy in front of him. Your mind was fractured too, a result of lab experimentation. Nezu reiterates his origin with a nod. It's funny how animalistic humans are compared to what you all consider snarling savages. Not easily misled. Batman puts the conversation back on the right course. What does this have to do with Eri? He takes an intimidating step forward. I was getting there. Nezu returns the intimidation with a sharp tone and dark glare. He waves a paw around while explaining. Just as the Yakuza had seen value in her quirk, so do I the ability to rewind. Imagine the ability to not just heal wounds, but to cure illnesses and so much more. She's still learning to control her quirk, and you can't force that out of her. Batman takes another step forward. Beneath his cape that's wrapped around him like a cloak, his gloved hands are balled into fists. Oh, I'm well aware, and I don't doubt that if she were to get a handle on it, that she wouldn't be more than willing to accommodate myself and others with such impairment. Nezu nods in agreement before gesturing towards the vigilante. Only if she were to be brought up by a true hero who could teach her such morals, of course. Certainly not the Yakuza. The response leaves Batman wary. He studies the Chimera's casual body language, searching for any signs of hidden intent. He speaks his thoughts aloud as he draws the conclusions that Nezu is making. You were testing me. To make sure. To ensure you were adequate enough to test her. Nezu finishes the sentence for the vigilante in his own words. And now that I'm back here at UA where I'll be free to conduct surveillance, she will receive even further guidance in the right direction. The principal then cheerily spreads his arms in an extravagant fashion as though to bring on an applause after performing a magic trick. You're a lunatic. All that for what? She's just a kid. Batman stares at the animal in disbelief. Sensing that the vigilante isn't as joyful about the prospect as he is, Nezu switches to a somber tone. A child who's been through a lot, just as you were. I know. I'm not incapable of sympathy. He offers pity of some kind that the orphan rejects with a sneer. You sure have a funny way of showing it. Batman recalls the wild goose chase and all of the effort Nezu put into such an overly complicated scheme. He's not quite convinced that the Chimera is telling the truth. What can I say? Puzzles, riddles, and games are my forte. Nezu leans back with a mischievous grin plastered across his muzzle. The black dots on his head that account for eyes don't sway from Batman's white lens. The vigilante turns his head, looking away. He sees the chess game that Nezu has set out in front of him. The placement of pieces looks like a war stratagem table. And you don't like to play by yourself. Batman keeps the principal talking in order to figure out more. And Nezu is happy to oblige. It's no fun to play alone. He moves a white pawn to capture a black pawn while giggling. You of all people should know that Batman's eyes narrow as he watches the animal play with his toys, wondering whose lives are in the balance of those pieces. Nezu keeps the black pawn in his paw, holding it up in front of the caped crusader, brooding. It can get lonely. Batman moves his attention away from what's in front of him, looking for something hidden, assuming the trickster is trying to distract him. When the vigilante notices a second chess table stowed away, he looks back with a suspicious stare. If that game board is for me, who was the other? He treads carefully with the inquisitiveness but doesn't back down. Nezu glances at the second game board, as though he just now realized it was there. Then he perks up at the mention of it, recalling its existence. He smiles with a tad of fondness as he says, "Oh, quite the humorous fellow. Not like I remember during the years of his tutelage. He and I shared a cup of tea together." Batman's eyes expand as he starts putting together the clues pointing towards the other player's identity. Panic begins to rise from the pit of his stomach. He demands rather than asking, "Who was it, Nezu?" Nezu blinks when he hears the vigilantist's tone. "Bakugo, your friend, the Joker," but provides the answer to the question anyways. His assumption, now confirmed to be the case much to his horror, leaves the caped crusader stupefied. "What have you done?" He has difficulty processing the terrible news. But once he does, he charges towards Nezu with a vengeance. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" The principal holds his paws up in a placating gesture that does absolutely nothing to stop the vigilante. Batman grabs Nezu by the front of his suit and hoists him upwards. "I didn't. Did you tell him everything that you told me? Your plan with Eri?" Batman yells into the chimera's face. Spit flies from the angry vigilantist's mouth, dotting the animal's fur. Oh, of course. In order to make conversation, Nezu stammers as he reels from the fit of rage. Without a surface beneath him, his legs dangle in the air as they search for sturdy footing. "Lunatic. Madman." Batman furiously shakes the enemy he has in his grip before tossing the foe across the room. Nezu tumbles into a bookshelf, startled by the roughhousing. "You're not as smart as you think you are." The vigilante growls more like a beast than the actual animal. "What do you mean? I'm not the one being a ruffian." Nezu spits blood out of his mouth as he stands up and dusts off his now wrinkled suit. Though caught off guard before, he's now prepared for another rush and prepares to defend himself if need be. But Batman brushes past Nezu, heading for the exit instead. He curses on his way out. Did it ever occur to you that Bakugo doesn't want to be cured? And it finally settles in as to why Midoriya is behaving the way that he is. Realizing that he may have misjudged how psychologically damaged Bakugo has become, Nezu places a paw against his forehead. "Oh my, I have made a mistake." He admits under his breath the dire miscalculation on his part. "You just put that poor girl's life in danger. If anything happens to her, you'll have a lot more than a damaged mind." And Batman leaves him with a parting promise that only reinforces the consequences of that error. Midoriya doesn't even wait until he gets to the car to contact Kurogiri. He places a finger to the comlink within his cowl. "Get Eri and seal yourselves in the cave. I'm on my way. I'll explain everything when I get there." He urgently gives orders while hurrying down the halls of UA without bothering to elaborate as to why he's demanding such a thing. He expects his partner in crime to question the order or provide some sort of remark, but gets nothing. Confused and worried by the radio silence, Midoriya tries again. "Kurogiri," he asks. One more time, Kurogiri. Just when he thinks the line is dead, Midoriya hears the rustling of a mic. However, his relief is only momentary. A laugh piques the audio in his ears. It's a demented cackle that he's all too familiar with. "Sorry, Smokey, the mama bear can't come to the phone right now." And the shrill voice that follows isn't very assuring either. "Kaken, what have you done?" Midoriya tries but fails to keep the distress out of his voice as his run turns into a sprint down the corridor he's in. He forgets about finding the doors to leave. He makes his own exit through a window, several stories up. His cape expands behind him, acting as a parachute to slow his descent and a paraglider to guide his fall. "If you've done anything." Midoriya cuts himself off as he struggles to find the right threat to use. "Oh, don't be such a worrywart." The speaker system blares as the villain gets right into the mic. Midoriya grits his teeth, resisting the urge to flinch. "How could I start without you?" No, I'll gladly wait." And the not-so-assuring assurance ushers him to hurry. He hops into his vehicle, revving the engine as it comes to life at his command. "I'll be there. Just keep your promise and wait." Midoriya pushes on the throttle and presses down on the gas pedal. The sleek-shaped automobile cuts through the wind as it races forward. "You hear me, Kaken? You wait for me." Midoriya cuts hard on the steering wheel and takes a turn down a service road to use as a shortcut back to his home in the manor. "You know me better than anyone, fat boob. I'm a man of my word." A giddy response plays through the car's speaker system this time, followed by a darker-toned, "See you soon." The vigilante yells in aggravation while urging the car to go faster. The speedometer reaches its limit and the tires tread the terrain with extreme force, weaving in and out of lanes being constructed. The vehicle runs over cautionary traffic cones without a care. With a press of a button, a flame shoots out the back of an exhaust port and the car's momentum carries it over a dead end and into a drained canal. The half-pipe serves as a raceway, a direct chute to the destination. Midoriya takes the route to the cave entrance, barreling through a waterfall that obscures its location. The car's tires bounce and skitter on landing as it swerves into the parking bay. The driver doesn't even wait for the vehicle's motion to cease, hatch sliding open up top for him to climb out. The caped Avenger lands with his boots making a heavy thud, headlights illuminating his arrival. He's met by a single applause coming from the rafters above. When Batman looks up, he's not surprised to see the pale face of his former childhood friend staring back down. A blood-red smile is smeared around his lips and his hair has been redyed green, punctuated by a purple dress attire. You do know how to make an entrance. The horrific clown visage greets his mortal enemy. Midoriya offers no words in response, instead opting to aim his grappling hook and firing it so that he can ascend to the same catwalk. His cape trails behind him up and over the railing. Only when he's face to face with his rival does he see Eri is also there. Her mouth is covered with duct tape, a red smile sharpied over it. Though brimmed with tears, her eyes light up upon seeing her guardian. Let her go. Midoriya faces the villain with the fury of a father, but Bakugo appears unfazed, laughing without a care. It looks like you got your swagger back. He instead addresses the vigilante's apparel with a gesture from the switchblade that slides out from under his sleeve. It presses against Eri's neck, unconsciously making Midoriya lean forward with the urge to rescue her. If you hurt her, I'll kill you, damn it. Midoriya growls through clenched teeth. He fights the instinct to protectively rush in, not wanting to risk Eri's safety. Bakugo frowns, cocking his head to the side. Now hold on a minute. That doesn't sound like you at all. Don't tell me. He narrows his eyes at the vigilante in front of him as though searching for a person that isn't there. Watching the gears work in a dismantled mind pushes Midoriya forward. Not wanting the unstable villain to do anything rash, he tries to keep him talking. I know exactly who I am. It's you who's lost their way. No, even your banter is all wrong. Midoriya seethes through his teeth when he sees Bakugo press the switchblade against Eri's throat a tad more. Well, this is just disappointing. You're just playing dress up at this point. Bakugo looks the vigilante up and down before setting his eyes on his hostage. But maybe Eri here can rewind you back to your former self. Yes, that's it. Midoriya breathes in and out before looking at the girl in captivity. Eri, just do what he tells you to. He tries to keep his tone calm to ease Eri's nerves while addressing her. Come on, brat, listen to Papa. But Bakugo makes it difficult. The blade begins digging into her throat, breaking skin. The threat is to urge her to use her quirk on Midoriya. But Eri's defiant eyes move from her guardians to her capturers, horn on her head glowing as it grows for a different purpose. A bright light illuminates the darkness of the cave, disturbing the bats that roost from stalactites above. The mammals swarm down as they're awoken by the increasing glow. Bakugo lets out a blood-curdling scream as he's enveloped by the light. It's so blinding that Midoriya can't even shield himself with his cape, nor can he see Eri anymore, concerned for his daughter's safety. He takes now as the opportunity to blindly rush in. Midoriya finds his arms around the waist of a slender but well-defined man. He realizes that he's grabbed onto Bakugo and not Eri. Closing his eyes, he commits and follows through with his charge. In one continuous move, he tackles the villain off of the rafters, bending forward so that they plummet headfirst. They hit cold water, a rude wake-up call. Bakugo breaks the surface first, twisting free from the jacket that Midoriya is holding onto. Midoriya discards the coat and swims after him, breathing in the cave's humid air once he too reaches the top. Gloved fingers grab the fiend by the throat. Who the fuck are you? Bakugo chokes out a surprised response as he's manhandled by the demon visage. Bats dart left and right as the vigilante pulls Bakugo close so that they're nose to nose. I'm vengeance. The caped crusader cloaks himself in darkness as he screams, I am the night. Finally finding himself, remembering who he is, he proclaims, I am Batman. A strong left hook knocks a few teeth loose, sending Bakugo back. The blonde, hair washed out by the guano-filled pool, staggers and trips over a stone. Batman is upon him before he can get up, already raining down more punches. There is nothing the vigilante can do to cause him the agony that he brought upon others, but he can come close. He can crush the clown's windpipe and sever all oxygen from his brain. He can push the criminal's ribs right through his lungs and rupture his heart. He can pound the villain's skull into the pavement until it fractures into so many pieces that brain spills out. Distantly, Kurogiri staggers into the lower section of the cave. He's disheveled, suit torn in places and metal collar dented. His yellow eyes broaden when they see what's happening. You have to think about what you're doing. Who and what made you who you are. Think of how an animal like him could never understand that. It's what makes him who he is and you who you are. Think, all those things are what the vigilante should have done long ago. To every single one of the criminals he fought. When he put them down, he should have put them down permanently. or so he believes now, on top of the one who dared take a child and threaten their life. God help me, you have thought this through. I don't know how I could stop you, but I won't let you throw your life away. The weak body of the man who raised Midoriya stumbles forward to try and grab his son, Kurogiri. Midoriya feels his father figure wrap his arms around him, a warm embrace that prevents him from further beating on Bakugo. If Batman wanted to be a killer, he could have started a long time ago. But it's a line. If you cross that line, if you kill tonight, man or animal, in my eyes, you'll be no different from him. Kurogiri's hold tightens around Midoriya's shoulders. The man trembles in the grip like a boy, slowly breaking. Bakugo lay unconscious in a pool of blood, smile wiped off his smug face. In the cave's pit, the tight space looks a lot like an alley. It was from an alley that a man with a gun emerged from the darkness and murdered Midoriya's mother and father. In that single moment, his childhood ended. He made a promise on their graves that he would rid this city of the evil that took their lives. Tonight, he nearly became a part of that evil. The bullet never left the chamber tonight, so the bullet hole in Bakugo's forehead has vanished. Iri's quirk has reverted him from that same evil. The little girl joins Kurogiri and her father, her childhood just beginning. Snowflakes dance in the shimmering sky, a choreographed ballet conducted by a gentle wind under the sun's spotlight. Steel-gray clouds roll in the distance, coming to close the final curtain. Not before all of the sunlit glitter can descend and cover the stage, though. The city, glistening windows illuminating the snowfall, tells the story of the play. In the end, the earth of yesterday is covered as white as any new page, marking the script's final chapter. It's the holiday season. Parents rush from work to buy their children gifts with their day's hard-earned money. Those same kids throw snowballs and sled down slopes in the areas unoccupied by adults. It's a wondrous sight to behold. Colored lights are strung between lampposts and traffic lights to make things all the more merry. It works. People are happy. Izuku Midoriya walks along the sidewalk, boots crunching the ice beneath his footfalls, taking it all in. His hands are shoved into the pockets of his full-length overcoat. The wool fabric is warming despite the bitter chill in the breeze. A green scarf is wrapped around his neck, pulled up past the point of his chin. The color complements his hair and the black of his wintry jacket, but the red of the rose he brandishes stands out the most. He cuts into a corner pocket, taking the alleyway separate from the sidewalk. Snow tries burying litter and trash, but the garbage still breaches the surface of white. Graffiti is glossed over with ice, but it's not washed away. The memory remains here, not so easily forgotten. Izuku bends a knee, crouching down at the exact spot of the alley that he lost his parents. He places the rose that he brought down, paying his respects. A plane soars overhead, casting a winged shadow over the orphan as he honors his mother and father. He's reminded of Tomoko Shiretoko and how she caught a flight back to America. She'd tried convincing him of going with her, but this is his home. A black cat meows as it steps into the alley, paws sinking into the snow. The feline hops from there onto a window ledge and slinks away, tail flicking back and forth. The shadow of the aircraft leaving the city passes by, snowflakes floating down and dotting Izuku's coat. He can see UA from here. The prestigious hero school had somehow survived scandals and much more to remain open, but all thanks to the cooperation of its principal turning himself in. After his mistake with Katsuki, Bakugo put a girl's life in danger. He surrendered peacefully. He deemed himself just as much a failure as he had considered the rest of hero society. Nezu confessed to his crimes and got Intelli her position back. And now, the same girl that had been put in danger by the school is kept safe there. UA reopened its dorming system and received better security from the tech department at Midoriya Enterprises. Thanks to a joint effort with the school, the company was able to recover its costs. The damage done with the money returned to those who had it stolen was reimbursed and covered. Funding to the hero school was back to an all-time high with the support company backing its departments and vice versa. It had also helped that Izuku sold his manor and resigned from his seat at the board of directors. It wasn't just a PR stunt, but a move he felt necessary after the revelations of his parents and the money that he inherited from them. He held a press conference and addressed all that had been disclosed to him by Commissioner Tsukachi. It was time for him to relinquish control of his business and accept responsibility on his family's behalf, because he still loves them despite what they did. Izuku stares at the rose he put down, imagining it would be kept in a vase instead if his mother were still alive. Perhaps his father would have given her a whole bouquet instead. He misses them. He forgives them for what they did. And he'll continue to fight for them, not for who they were, but what had happened to them. He rewrites his vows as he's showered by snow, the slate wiped clean. The earpiece Izuku keeps on him beeps in his ear, alerting him to an incoming call. He wished not to be disturbed but accepts it anyways, mainly out of curiosity of who could be reaching out to him. It's not Kurogiri. He had relieved his caretaker of duty. After Nezu revealed to him his guardian was really just a Namu made to be a butler, he decided to free Kurogiri of his slavery. Whoever the modified man was before and who he is now, he was now able to figure out for himself. Yes, Izuku presses his index and middle finger to the communicator in his ear. Hey, Izuku, a voice he recognizes answers, one that brings him both joy and pain. Melissa, he can already envision the blonde now. Except, what he sees is the woman he allowed to be put in a wheelchair for the rest of her life. He closes his eyes, trying to black out the mental image. He sees what his childhood friend had become instead, the one who had put her in the wheelchair. Izuku opens his eyes, preferring to see anyone other than that. Do you have any plans to celebrate? Melissa sounds hopeful though. It could just be the time of the year, but he hopes that her tone is an indication that she's on the right track to recovery. Even so, he has to turn her down. He shakes his head, then remembers she can't see him. I'm not very used to celebrating. He looks down the alley and remembers the night he lost his childhood cheer for holidays. Come on, it's the holidays. You have to, but Melissa doesn't let it go. She urges him on as his eyes land back on the rose that's being specked with snowflakes. You shouldn't spend the day alone. The flower is almost buried in the snow like the trash. I won't, Izuku whispers. He looks up at the sky. The gray clouds that had been distant before are now beginning to block out the sun. Soon, bats will be leaving their caves to hunt during the night. I have another reason to celebrate. He blinks when he feels his eyes becoming moist. Though, and Melissa hears the crack in his voice to know he means what he's saying. Last night was the first time in 54 years without violent crimes. Izuku allows tears to roll down his cheeks as he watches the first of the city's bats take to the snowy sky. Snowflakes float gracefully from the night sky, pale in the glow of moonlight and glittering from the illumination of street lamps. Some droplets of ice land in between the small crevices of buildings, beneath the brick chimneys and smokestacks, under the thick smog of pollution where even more filth resides. Snow starts building a foundation of slippery slush, beauty corrupted and turned ugly. Darkness has fallen over the city and taken with it the cheerful laughter of children during the day. Now, predators roam. Parents have hidden their young. Cold went from playful nipping to bitter biting. Bats swarm the sky in search of prey. The violent flapping of their wings disturbs the vermin that hides away below. Rats scurry into sewer drains and beneath fully maggot-loaded dumpsters. The shadows circle overhead, keeping them in check. Suddenly, an even greater shadow with a much larger wingspan overtakes the others. The smaller flying mammals give way to their bigger counterpart. The night belongs to them all. The hunt is shared, but the city belongs to him. The Batman. Below, a family of 3 hurries down a sidewalk. They were late getting out of a store, and even later to catching a cab or a bus. With transportation no longer running, they find themselves running. The chill of the night snaps at their heels. They think about cutting through an alley to lessen the time that they're exposed to the cold's bite. They foolishly try the shortcut. A young boy runs in between his mother and father, all of them oblivious to the phantom stranger ahead of them that blocks the alley's path. Like the ghost of Christmas past, a man holds the family at gunpoint. He demands a wallet from the boy's father. The proud parent steps in front of his child protectively. His wife at his side, silver necklace glimmering in the snow like a pearl necklace, is on the verge of screaming. All Might had died a long time ago. He won't be coming to their rescue. It's the holiday, so there are no police officers on duty to patrol the streets. Not even the current heroes are willing to sacrifice their personal time away from their own families to protect another's. Only one who knows what it's like to lose a family comes. The dark night of the night. A horned demon visage rises up from the shadows behind the family, positioned directly over the boy. White eyes contrast the black void of the monster's shape, narrowing to fixate on the man trying to mug the family. Suddenly, the gun in the bandit's hand begins to shake. His palms have become sweaty, fingers losing their grip on the firearm. The caped crusader doesn't waver though, not even the slightest tremor while having a murder machine aimed at him. Continue to point that gun at us, and I guarantee you will never walk again. The vigilante come to the family's rescue speaks in a low and raspy voice that startles even them. The mother and father split apart, gasping. The boy in between becomes frozen in place, gawping at the ominous figure that towers above him. The gunman lets out his own gasp through an equally jaw-dropped mouth. The terrifying presence of the living shadow's threat holds a heavy-weighted vengeance. The weapon slips from the man's hold and falls to the ground, sinking in the snow. After a moment of shivering in the night, exposed to fear, the cowardly and superstitious criminal flees. His boots leave indentions in the snow, a trail of footprints that Batman plans to follow later. Wise choice, but first he eases his posture to be less intimidating around the family. The would-be mugger wasn't the only one petrified by the Dark Knight's appearance. Go home. He even reins in the amount of deepness put into his tone when turning to address them. The parents shakily nod, waving their son over. Once grouped together, the 3 of them scamper off just as quickly as the criminal fled. Batman is left alone in the alley, standing in the place of where the boy had stood. It's Christmas. That family has nothing. You should have given them some sense of hope. But the silence of solitude is short-lived when the communicator in his cowl crackles to life. Melissa Shield communicates with him over the comm line as his oracle. She watched everything through the video recording lens that cover his eyes. The boy isn't hurt. His parents are alive. That's more than some people can hope for. Batman looks back to see if the child and his family are still around. They aren't. Everything else is replaceable. He whispers a breath of condensation before facing forward again, and then begins following the trail that the criminal left behind. Melissa winces, sensing that the vigilante's words resonated with himself. When not Batman, he's Izuku Midoriya, the boy who had been orphaned and grew up unconventionally. She figures she crossed a line, that perhaps he did want to spend the night alone. Wow, I've been blabbing in your ear all night, haven't I? I'm sorry. I'm still getting used to this. I'll turn it off now. She reaches for the button on her computer to cut the line and leave him to his vices. But her finger stops short of pressing it, hovering over the button when she hears Izuku's response. Don't apologize. He still sounds sad, but he's no longer using the voice he does as Batman. And don't turn it off. She watches through the visual recording of his mask as he leaves the alley and enters the vast city. I don't mind the company.